Oh, there. I think I've got it. Look at this. Careful now. Ah, it's beautiful. Oh, look at that. Wow. Ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablet. It's, unfamiliar characters to me. These ones I know. Should turn this way, perhaps. Well. Oh, careful now. There we are. Well, I'm not sure what some of these characters are. Unfamiliar to me. We'll have to take this back to my colleagues and see if we can figure out what those mean. Well, this is absolutely fantastic. I'm very excited. Wow, everybody, let's cue the music.
A billion suns explode. The comet trails across the sky. Your eyes on overload. Lay down on your daddy's car and reach right up and touch the stars. Welcome to the lights in the sky. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the lights in the sky. Welcome to the show. Celestial show. It's good.
Greetings, fellow music fans. This is Music is a Journey, episode 20. I'm Peter Scove, and I'm very excited about episode 20 because today I'm going to be featuring some artists and some bands, and we're going to hear some of their music. Now, if you've been following this video channel, last year, 2018, all the first 12 episodes were just about featuring artists, talking about their histories, discographies, latest releases, and featuring samples of their music. Now from this year I've been doing other things, mentioning like top 25 lists or specific things in my collection and so on. And it's not because I decided to go off and do something completely different from last year. It's like that I always wanted to do such a thing. When I first conceived of this video channel, I made a list of a few dozen ideas, and then I just started out introducing lots of people's music, but I always wanted to do these other things, and so that's what I've been doing this year. However, it's not that I've completely changed the format. I still want to introduce the music of artists, and I still have people contacting me, asking me to review their albums for Prog Archives, and so when that happens, I like to say, if I like the music, I'd like to include you into this video program, and everybody seems to always think that's a good idea. So here we go. Today, our first artist we're going to talk about is Steve Bonino. Now, whenever I go to feature an artist, I always like to dig into their histories and find out what they were doing up until the point of their latest release. And Steve is a particularly interesting character because his career thus far has not been limited to music alone. Steve also spent about 10 years working as an actor. So, just going to his biography on the internet, it turns out Steve is, first of all, he is the only son of an American dancer. Let me just check the name. Ros Valero was his mother, and his father was an Italian singer, Ernesto Bonino, who came to the US and met Ros, and, you know, things happened, and we got Steve. Alright, so his family, both his parents, already in show business, and as a young man, Steve decided to study voice, and he went to the High School of Music and Arts in New York, which is a sister high school to the school that was featured in the TV series Fame, if you remember that one. My sister loved it. I watched a few episodes too. Alright, now Steve appeared in a lot of movies, TV movies, dramas during the 70s through the early 80s, but his first kind of big role was in a Saturday morning kids show called The Kids from Caper. Yeah, there he is. So, The Kids from Caper, it was a kind of kids show spoof based on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and combined with the Monkees. And in fact, Don Kirshner was actually the executive producer of the show. And so Steve got the role as TP, PT. PT, sorry, TP is toilet paper, isn't it? He got the role of PT, and one of the things that made his role special from the others is, first of all, he got to do these narration scenes where the camera would just focus on him, or sometimes just his voice, and he would give a little bit of explanation of what was actually happening at the time. By the way, this show was about 4 young men who help out with the in the police to solve mysteries, but always in a comedic kind of way. And in fact, the fictitious town in which they operated in was called Northeast Southwestern. Okay, anyway, and another thing that was a feature of Steve's character was that his nose was really good at sniffing things out, and even his nose had its own name, Seymour, and there's Seymour going into action right there from the episode King Cone. Okay, because this was a show aimed at young people, Steve and the guys, they got featured in magazines like Teen Beat, Teen Mag, whatever, all these magazines in the 70s that had teen in the title. Tiger Beat, okay, it doesn't have teen, but whatever. So Steve was featured in those magazines a lot, giving interviews and so on. And in fact, though his bio, or at least some bio out there somewhere, the Kids from Caper bio, tells about which magazine issues he was in, and some of those are actually available on eBay, but they usually feature like David Cassidy or John Travolta on the cover, so anyway, whatever. After that, he also appeared in, there's this one TV movie called Tarantulas, The Deadly Cargo, and it's actually available on YouTube. You can watch the whole video. I did. Kind of an interesting movie anyway. I won't get into the details, but you can watch it if you want. Steve plays, his character in the credits is listed as Spud. However, his real name in the movie is Steve. He's called Steve throughout the movie, so I don't know where Spud came from. It was probably an idea which they ended up trashing and just calling him by his real name anyway. So he plays a teacher at a school for autistic kids, and he ends up, you know, helping out solve the problem with the tarantulas a little bit here and there. He also appeared in some TV dramas or TV sitcoms I used to watch, such as One Day at a Time, where he appeared as the bass player in a band. He also appeared in a program called Phyllis, which I actually don't remember watching, but I recognize the guy in this scene here. This is Steve talking to this one guy here. Yeah, I recognize that guy, so probably I watched that show. And he was also in 8 is Enough. And if I can put a little side note in here, the father in 8 is Enough, Dick Van Patten, he went on to start a business making these kind of like a dog, salami dog, not made out of dog of course, but I mean like, you know, dog food type things. And I used to work for a pet food and supply warehouse wholesaler in Canada many long years ago, and we had this big trade show, and Dick actually came out, and somewhere around in a box I have this card with Dick Van Patten's picture on, signed, you know, something that's kind of cool. But anyway, back to Steve. So Steve appeared in some TV movies, TV dramas, and he went on to appear in some Broadway performances as well as in LA. But from 1975 to 1985 he did that, and then after that he stopped. And I actually asked him what was the reason. I was just kind of curious, right? Because it looked pretty cool to see all these clips of him in programs that you can find on YouTube. The clips are on YouTube. And anyway, he just said that basically to keep up the acting career, you have to be really perseverant, you have to keep going for the parts and being really kind of aggressive to try to get the roles. And so he just decided he really wanted to focus all his energy on music. So that's where he went with that. So though he'd always been involved in music, Steve Bonino went on to concentrate on music only after 1985, and he did a lot of work with music. Just checking my notes here, he played with Screaming Jay Hawkins. I've actually heard of that name. And he was also in a band called Autograph. However, it seems it was a German band. I don't know if it's Autograph. It looked like it was spelled A-V, not A-U. But anyway, it's not the famous American band Autograph. I looked into that. Oh well, anyway. So let's see here. He also played in various bands, did session work for NBC, KCET, HBO, and the Playboy Channel. He played in a lot of cover bands as well as original bands, and In his on his website, there are 16 albums in his discography, which includes a group called Blue Plasma Orb, Zabacus, some of his solo albums, as well as work he did with Peter Matukniak, whom we featured earlier on in the series, I think episode 3, Bomber Goggles, and his own Steve Bonino Project. Now, actually, it's because of his involvement with Peter Matukniak in the first place that I got to know about Steve. I know he appears on one of Peter's solo albums, which I have up here. I probably was on Cover Me or Destiny. Anyway, he's up on that. And he's also in Bomber Goggles. This one here, which was a very popular album on Prog Archives last year. And the interesting thing about the name Bomber Goggles is originally they just used letters from the different band members' names and just put them in to come up with an arbitrary band name. And somebody noticed that the letters together kind of spelled out Bomber Goggles. And so the B-O in Bomber Goggles... Did I just say the B-O in Bomber Goggles? Ew. Anyway, the B-O comes from Steve's Bonino. So, a little bit of trivia there for you. Fun fact, as they call it these days. Bomber Goggles. Okay. So, I knew about Steve. I think I'd even complimented his bass playing on Facebook somewhere. And earlier on this year, he sent me the latest Steve Bonino Project album, Stargazer 2, which is the sequel to Stargazer. Now, the timing of these was actually really interesting in a coincidental kind of way because, as you will find out, there is... in the storyline that's going on in these two albums, especially on the second one, there is a Sumerian theme. So just before I get into these albums, I'm going to consult with Dr. Appeltoff, who is doing some research into Sumerian tablets. And so we'll just contact him here for a moment and see what he has to say that will then lead us into the Stargazer story. So let's see here. Dr. Appeltoff, are you there?
Hello? Hello?
Ah.
Hello, Peter? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. The tablets then, yes? All right.
Okay.
Okay, do you have the pictures I sent?
All right, the pictures. Here we go.
Okay, good.
As you know, the ancient Sumerians left us a vast record of cuneiform text in stone tablets, as well as some impressive visual records in stone. Many of these carvings we can see objects in the sky, such as a sun-like object, a crescent moon, orbs, and a bird-like flying object with a human figure set upon it. This bird-like object appears in many carvings. As well, there are carvings that appear to represent the sun and the planets, with an extra planet being called Planet X, X for 10, or Tiamat, or Nibiru. All these objects, and as well some of the cuneiform translations, are speculated to be, by some, evidence that the ancient Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, were actually visitors from another planet that enters our solar system every 3,600 years. This belief was echoed by the Iraqi transport minister, who claimed the ziggurat of Ur was the Earth's first airport, or perhaps more accurately, a spaceport. What is interesting is to see that many carvings show the Anunnaki handing agricultural tools, and thus technology, over to humans. Still, one wonders about the bird figures and the fish figures. And many speculate upon the Sumerian atomic bomb. Haha, you may have seen this on the internet. As you know, I'm working on cuneiform translation, and I found an extraordinary piece, just a tablet, this morning. The characters are unfamiliar to me, so I'll be very excited to work this one out with my colleagues. Okay, I hope this helps, Peter. I hope this is what you need for your video. Good luck with it, and thank you for asking me. Goodbye.
So, now let's take a listen to some of the tracks off the Stargazer album. First of all, we're going to listen to a little bit from Phoenix Rising. This is where the big space vessel carrying the 7,000 occupants lifts up from Earth and heads out into space, off to another world. Phoenix Rising.
Glimmering beneath the clouds, the phoenix rises tall into the sky. The fastest ship that man's ever made, moving closer to the speed of light. Phoenix rising, from the ashes of our world. Phoenix rising, from the ashes of our world.
Next, we come to Earth 2. This is our new home on Proxima B. So let's listen to this exciting track here, Earth 2. Really upbeat.
We are your last and greatest hope. We are the scientists, teachers, students, leaders, and the Pope. Confirming the Pope is safely on board. We are entrusted to save what we busted and carry on all of the world. If we don't make it, we fail or we break it. The future of man will be lost.
So, Earth 2, Proxima B, our new star is a red dwarf star. And what is it like? What are living conditions like on this new planet? Well, let's listen to a little bit now from Under the Red Dwarf Sun.
Under the red dwarf sun, a new life has begun. Under the red dwarf sun, under the red dwarf sun.
Warning, X-rays exceed maximum allowable levels. Please remain indoors. Warning, X-rays exceed maximum allowable levels. Please remain indoors.
X-rays.
Warning, X-rays exceed maximum allowable levels. Please remain indoors.
And there we have it. We are settled on a new world. Let's listen to a little bit from the track, A New World.
We can make it. We can make it. World's largest time. It's a fresh start when we wake up on a new world tonight. Hope in our hearts when we wake up on a new world tonight. It's a new world. It's our only world. It's a chance to find what we lost in time and make a brand new life on a new world tonight.
Okay, and we have 20 years later. Children are being born. Well, I hope they don't have these spooky space eyes. But yes, a new generation of human beings born on a new world here 20 years later. The dream lives on through the eyes of a child, and finally Nova. Now, Nova is new, so we would imagine that human beings are off to a new start and everything's grand, but the actual music in Nova is pretty tense and sometimes kind of ominous, so you have to wonder if this new start is still not fraught with a lot of challenges and dangers for humanity. Let's move on to Stargazer 2. Stargazer 2, life continues on Proxima B, and the people have discovered that they have enough spare parts that they can actually construct a large dome. And this means that they are able to live under the dome, be able to go outside more, protection from the radiation. And there's an interesting line in there that children can play in the park. outside without shortening their days. And I thought that line was interesting because it could mean that being outside in the radiation limits your daytime outdoors. You know, like you can only go out in the sun here for so long before you have to start thinking about skin cancer. So, I mean, it could be like they can go out longer without shortening their days, as in their daytime spent outdoors, but at the same time, the threat of radiation and what it can do to human body could also mean shortening their days, as in future problems, cancer, and so on. Anyway, let's listen to a little bit from Under the Dome.
Would feel at home and there would be my friends and family under the dome with me.
And now we go to the dark light divide, where one half of the planet is lit by sunlight perpetually and the other side is in the coldness of space, and right around the middle you get that dividing point, dark light divide. And so they send an expedition out there and they find an ancient city, and they find some ancient text written on the stone and bring it back, and Dr. Azaroff, he takes a look at this and he realizes he can read it because the text is actually ancient Sumerian. Wow. Well, what does all this mean? If the same text on Proxima b is what we find on Earth, does that mean that we are actually alien progeny? So now we've discovered that it's very likely the ancient Sumerians, the Anunnaki, were actually visitors from another planet that repopulated to Earth, and we are their offspring, basically. Wow, so what does that mean? Well, we go on to a track called Hyperspeed Overdrive, which is an instrumental, but very exciting music. Let's check that one out. And finally, the news that we, human beings, are the progeny of ancient alien beings actually sends out fear among the population on Proxima b. So let's check out a little bit from this track, Fear. that's where the album ends. So it's kind of open-ended, leaving a possibility for a Stargazer 3. Judging by the music that Steve Bonino has produced here on these two albums, I would very much welcome a Stargazer 3. Make it a trilogy, Steve. Come on! All right. That's it. Steve Bonino, Stargazer, Stargazer 2, and other Steve Bonino music. I think you can find him on Bandcamp. You can certainly find order his stuff from his website, I think. Go check it out if you liked what you heard. So I've mentioned Peter Matukniak, and Peter's been rather busy here this past year or so. One of the bands he became involved in is a band called Kinetic Element, and he plays on their latest album here, The Face of Life. Alright, I wasn't really familiar with Kinetic Element so much, but apparently this is their fourth album. And I did happen to know the name of the keyboard player, Mike Visaggio. As it turns out, I actually was connected with him on Facebook somehow, but we never really communicated with one another. I guess it's just, you're friends of Peter's and I'm friends of Peter's, so let's be friends, and yeah. Anyway, I was really grateful that Peter sent me this to listen to it, because this is what you would expect from a traditional symphonic prog band, but it's done really, really well. I mean, it has that bass sound, and you've got all the keyboards, and you've got the guitar playing, and you've got the long, complex songs and different parts and so on. This kind of, overall arching theme to the whole thing. So it's really a great piece of work, and as I've read from some of the reviews on Prog Archives, I think it was, people are saying that this album really supersedes anything Kinetic Element have done in the past. So, lucky me, I got a copy. So before we go on to this, I want to talk a little bit about keyboard player Mike Visaggio, who is the man behind the band. Mike started out playing accordion when he was 9 years old back in the early 60s. And when I saw that, I immediately thought of Dennis DeYoung of Styx, because, recently I've been talking about Styx, and Dennis DeYoung also started out on accordion back in the early 60s. But anyway, Mike is actually from the New York area, not Chicago. So he started out on accordion, and by the time he was 16 years old, he started playing in bands. I think by this time as a keyboard player, not an accordion player. And in the 1970s here, according to my notes, he teamed up with a fellow named Billy Falcon in 1975, and he played on Billy Falcon's Burning Rose band albums, which was 3 LPs and an EP. In that band, they also had a fellow named Ed Gagliardi. The name sounded familiar, and as it turns out, it's because Ed actually went on to play in Foreigner. Made it big time with that, so that's cool. Anyway, then in 1978, Mike became a Christian, and he continued to play with rock bands, but Christian rock bands during the 1980s. However, he wasn't making the big time with music, and he did have to support a family. So, like a lot of musicians out there, he had to put music to the side and took up a job as a truck driver, driving 18-wheelers across the United States. And he did that for almost 20 years before finally returning to music. And it's a darn good thing for us that he did. So he started working on something called Starship Universe. So he started out doing Starship Universe, the Starship Universe project on his own, and he was using a drum machine. But then he met up with a fellow named Michael Murray, who was a drummer who decided he wanted to play drums with Mike. And then after that, they got in Mark Tupko on bass and a guitarist, Todd Russell. And from 2008 to 2017, this was the basic lineup of the band. They did a lot of instrumental stuff. However, they also had a vocalist in, St. John Coleman, who did some vocals with the band. And then 2017, their guitarist decided he wanted to do things a little bit differently, and so he parted ways amicably with the band. And as well, the vocalist wasn't completely satisfied with his role in the band, so he also departed from the band. And then they got in touch with Peter Matukniak, whom we know from Bomber Goggles, Gecko Project, solo work, and other things. And so he was asked to play on the latest album. Over here, The Face of Life, which came out earlier this year. It was originally intended for release late last year, 2018, but anyway, it came out this year. And then their vocalist, St. John Coleman, sorry, I keep looking at my notes, but anyway, St. John Coleman, he actually was asked to come back for the album, and they gave him more leeway to do what he felt he wanted to do with the music. And according to an interview in Proglodites, the recording went very well. So let's take a look at Kinetic Element over here, The Face of Life. So it is divided. It is actually originally released as CD, download, and vinyl. So one thing that I read about the older Kinetic Element, why can't I say that? Kinetic Element albums, is that they were pretty long, going up to about 70 minutes. And here, because they intended it to be a vinyl release, it's about a 45-minute album, and it's divided into side 1, which includes Epistle and All Open Eyes. Epistle is just over 7 minutes long, and All Open Eyes is almost 16 minutes long. Now, Epistle is quite good, but All Open Eyes is where my eyes and my ears really opened up to the album. First, let's listen to the beginning part, and doesn't it sound a little bit like Gentle Giant and Yes? Listen to this part here.
We know the wind doesn't blow in vain. Seeking to cry out every person's name. And though the list has no end, once it's begun, the song of finishing is often sung.
Okay, and then after that, the song really starts to get going, and it's, 15, 16 minutes, it's hard to go and say, you gotta listen to this, you gotta listen to this, but you really gotta listen to this. Check out this part here, just near the beginning of the song. Alright, and that's it for side 1. Then on side 2, we go to the title track, The Face of Life. And this is 19 minutes and 35 seconds long. So quite an epic piece. Beautifully done. It is never boring. There are lots of nice change-ups in the music. The music is always cool and exciting. There are some great keyboard solos. Peter gets some chance to shine on the guitar. So I want to pick out 2 parts from The Face of Life. So let's just listen to these 2 parts from that track. Alright, and the album then wraps up with a song called Last Words, just over 4 minutes long, and if you have the CD, there is a Last Words bonus track, which is a little bit shorter, just under 3 minutes, and it's a variation of the Last Words from the album proper, I guess. Also very nice track there too. There are last words for everyone. But anyway, that should give you an introductory idea of what kind of music to expect from Kinetic Element's album, The Face of Life, from this year, 2019. And as well, if you're interested in checking out their previous work, you can. I think I might look into that myself as well. All right, Kinetic Element. If you want to know more about Mike, there's the mikevisaggio.com website. A little bit out of date, but you can also find interview on Proglodites if you search for Kinetic Element and Proglodites. There is also a YouTube interview with Mike as well that you might want to check out, which is, just to hear about what he has to say about things. Okay, that's Kinetic Element. Before we go, I want to do one more album. So early on in the series, we introduced Marco Ragni, an Italian songwriter, guitar player, keyboard player, and we talked a little bit about his career, his latest releases, and then later on last year, he released an album called The Wandering Caravan, which we also then mentioned in an episode. It actually held the #1 spot on Prog Archives on the summer solstice last year. But anyway, we talked about that. Then Marco turned 50 this year. I think I said happy birthday, but there you go. And for his 50th birthday, he really wanted to put out his best work. And this is not a collection of best work. This is his best new material, and which he did here on this album. Well, it's hard to say if it's his best because he has a lot of really great material. But this album here was the result, Oceans of Thought. And I would like to feature just a couple of snippets from tracks on here, just as our close up to the video here. But I want to say that this was kind of a really big deal, his 50th birthday, and this was going to be the album released for that. This was his album for the year. However, since then, Marco then turned around and re-released his first solo album from 1997, Looking Through a Kaleidoscope, a kind of psychedelic album. So he has put that out. Then he's already working on his next album, which I have here, Mind Overclock, Captain Spiders and the Space Riders. David Bowie influence perhaps somehow? Not sure. But anyway, this is coming out in 2019, so we'll be looking forward to that. Okay, now let's just listen to a few clips from a couple of the tracks off Oceans of Thought.
Wave after wave, life is infinite like the sea. Leaves fall in autumn, and other leaves will bloom in spring. The sun sets and another sun will rise. Time disappears, something comes time again. It is the moment I've been waiting for so long. Only a fool lives his future in the past. To get out of a maze, just fly. But to escape from a cage, it takes imagination.
So there you have it, some of the tracks from Oceans of Thought by Marco Ragni. Okay, that concludes episode 20 of Music is a Journey. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and I'd like to extend special gratitude towards, first of all, Steve Bonino. Steve, thank you so much for sending me your albums for review and allowing me to feature them in this video, and thanks for answering some of the questions I had along the way. I'd also like to say thanks to Mike Visaggio of Kinetic Element for being very supportive of me featuring this album in the video, and also special thanks to Peter Matukniak, as always. Thank you for sending this to me and giving me the opportunity to listen to the wonderful music of Kinetic Element. Kinetic Element, at the time of this recording, are going to be doing some shows on the east coast of the US, and Peter has flown out from California to join them, so that's pretty cool. Wish I could be there. Anyway, and then of course, always thanks to Marco Ragni. I hope this album met your expectations. Thanks for letting me feature it, and I guess you're going to be back here next year with Captain Spider and the Space Riders.
You must understand, he is unstoppable, this man named Marco.
Alright, again, thanks everybody, and I will catch you next time in episode 21, which I've already begun work on. See you then.
Someone is waiting.